Okay, everybody, greetings. It's time to begin the Bible study. And today is the 24th day of Cheshvan and the 10th day of November 2012. We're getting very close to the magic marker day of December 21, the end of the Mayan calendar. That's just a little over a month away, so if you're preparing for the end of the world, you only got a month left. Of course, we know the world's not going to end on December 21st. The Mayan calendar is going to end. The long count calendar is going to end, but the world is not coming to an end. It's just the phase of the calendar. But it does tell us something, I think, that the Mayans were right in one respect, that this is the end of an age and the beginning of another age. Man's ages on the earth. We had the pre-Noachian flood age, then we had the age from the flood until Abraham, and then the age from Abraham until Moses and the Exodus, and then we've had the age from Exodus until the building of the temple in the days of Solomon. Then we've had that time until the coming of Christ in 4 BC and his ministry. Then that being fulfilled 2,000 years later, here we are at the end of the age of the 6,000 years of man's appearance and rule on the earth since his creation. Creation was 4004 BC, according to Archbishop Usher, and is very carefully calculated chronology of the scriptures. And we have an article on that in case you want to study into it yourself. But we are living now in the time after the 6,000 years, because the actual 6,000 years from creation expired in 1997, the year of the appearance of the Hale-Bopp comet. Then after that, it was 7 years, according to the Book of Jubilees, before Adam and Eve were tempted by Satan the devil and sinned. Tempted by the serpent. Satan was in the guise of the serpent. And they fell into sin 7 years to the very day after they were created, according to the Book of Jubilees. So 7 years from 4004 BC is 1997 BC. And if we count 6,000 years of God's plan from 1997 BC, it brings us to 2004 AD, the time that mankind has been on the earth and under the influence of Satan the devil, because that's when they began to follow the ways of Satan. They gave in to temptation and disobeyed God, and so they were cut off from God except through prayer and repentance. And the whole world has been basically cut off from God ever since. And so since that time, Satan has been the prince of the power of the air. And he is the God of this world. And those who are called of God to understand his truth know and understand these things. And they do know that this world is in the hands of the devil, that he is the architect of the world's governments, societies, civilizations, that they are all under his sway, but not completely so, because there is one in charge over the devil and over all of creation, and that is God himself, God the Father, and Yeshua, the Messiah, the Logos, the one who sits at the right hand of God the Father in heaven. And we learn from the scriptures how God rules in the world, because he is the one who is in charge and rules over all. And we learn from the book of Job that even the devil can do nothing regarding men individually or collectively except by God's permission. That Satan can have no influence whatsoever except that God allows it. And Almighty God has a purpose for allowing Satan to do his deviltry and cause his confusion and to lead nations astray in this era, this time that we're living in. God is allowing it, and he has a reason. He told us it would be so in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9. He speaks of Satan, that old serpent, the devil, who deceives the nations, who deceives the whole world. No, he couldn't do that unless God allowed him to have access, you might say, to the minds of men. And Satan is able to promulgate his message, his conspiracy theory, you might say, in which he accuses God of being a conspirator, conspiring against the best interests of mankind. And he says God's way is all wrong, and obedience to God is slavery. And if you really want freedom, then go the way of the flesh. Go the way that appeals to your intellect, your human mind. You don't have to obey God. You can be your own God. That's the message of Satan, and most mankind is basically fallen for one of the myriad deceptions that Satan has promulgated in the earth. And therefore, Satan, being the god of this world, he does have his part in establishing human kingdoms, leading them astray. But yet Daniel tells us in Daniel chapter 2, in talking about the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had that none of the wise men could understand. And he was going to kill all the wise men in Babylon unless they could tell him both what the dream was that he had forgotten and what the interpretation of the dream meant. And we read in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 19, "Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons." God alters time itself, even the orbit of the earth around the sun. He changes the seasons. He has power over all things. And Daniel says in verse 21, he removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those of understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. So Daniel praised God who gave him the understanding of Nebuchadnezzar's vision and dream. But my point I want to make here is that it is Almighty God who removes kings and raises up kings. Now, we just went through an election here in the United States in which Mitt Romney was seeking to be president, and Barack Obama was seeking to retain the presidency. And as it turns out, after the election this past week, Obama won. It was a rather narrow victory, population vote-wise, but he got over 303 electoral votes to Romney's about 200, I forget, 17, I think. But anyway, he won a resounding victory. And this was despite the pundits on Fox News channel and the some who predicted Romney would have a sweeping victory, such as Dick Morris, who had to admit the day or two after the election with egg all over his face that he had blown it. He had miscalculated the previous elections and the composition of the voters and the election returns, and the election of 2008, which he thought, rather of 2010, which he thought changed the equation of the elections and showed that Barack Obama was weak and he could be defeated. But that election turned out to be the anomaly, not the election in 2008 when Obama was elected president. That tended to be the election which established the trend. So he was looking to the wrong compilation of elections and should have thrown out the one of 2010 and went with the same statistics that the other networks and other posters went by, and then he would have been much closer to the truth. Because there's no doubt that Obama won. Now in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 1, chapter 2, I should say. I thought it was chapter 2, but anyway, this is a story of a woman by the name of Hannah, who was married to a Levite who served at God's house. And this Levite, Elkanah, had two wives. One was Hannah, and the other one was Peninnah. But Hannah was barren and had no children. But she was a God-fearing woman, and she prayed earnestly to God, earnestly from her heart, that God would give her a son. Because the Lord had closed her womb, it says in chapter 1, verse 5. And her rival, his other wife, provoked her severely to make her life miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb, in verse 6. So year by year, Hannah would go up to the house of God and would weep and not eat. And her husband said to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why is your heart grieved? And am I not better to you than 10 sons? Because he really loved her. So Hannah rose after she finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, or the temple of the house of God, the tabernacle, was located in those days. And Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle. And Hannah was in bitterness of spirit and soul, and prayed to the Lord, and wept in anguish. This was a very deep, earnest, meaningful prayer. And she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your handmaid, your maidservant, and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, a boy, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and devote him to your service as a Nazirite, and no razor shall come upon his head. And as she was praying, Eli the priest was watching, and watched her mouth. And Hannah spoke in her heart, but her lips moved. But her voice wasn't heard, and Eli thought she was drunk. And Eli said to her, How long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Don't consider your handservant, your maidservant, a wicked woman. For out of the abundance of my complaint and my grief have I spoken until now. And Eli was corrected. He stood corrected. And he said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you've asked of him. So she went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Well, then God answered her prayer, and she had her son, whom she named Samuel. And she dedicated him to the service of God, and Samuel became a prophet and an attendant of the priests at the temple. And she says in verse 27, For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition, which I asked of him. Therefore I have also lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, shall he be lent to the Lord, and given to the Lord's service. So they worshiped the Lord there. And then Hannah prayed. She went before God in prayer and rejoiced in the Lord, saying her horn, her power was exalted in the Lord. And no one is like the Lord, holy like the Lord. There's none besides Him, nor is there any rock like our God, she said. And then she said in verse 4, the bows of the mighty men are broken, and those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, a total overturn of society. And the hungry have ceased to be hungry. And even the barren have given birth, as in her own case. And she who has many children has now become feeble. And Hannah prayed and said, verse 6 of chapter 2, the Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes, and makes them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and He has set the world upon them. He will guard the feet of His saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven He will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to His king, and exalt the horn of His anointed. Well, here's another example in the Scriptures where it says God is the one who makes people poor and makes them rich. He brings people low, including princes and kings, and He lifts people up from the dust to become princes and kings. He is the one in charge. And this is shown even in the book of Daniel again, in chapter 8 or 9 or 10. Let me get the right chapter here. Daniel chapter 10, it is, where Daniel is praying in the third year of King Cyrus. A message was revealed to him. And the message was true, but it was a prophecy of the future. Appointed time was long, verse 1. And Daniel understood the message and had understanding of the vision. And after he had that vision of the future, it says he was mourning for 3 full weeks and ate no pleasant food and no meat or wine during that whole period of time. And then the 24th day of the first month, he was standing beside the great river, probably the Euphrates, or rather the Tigris River, which merges with the Euphrates there at Babylon. And he lifted up his eyes and saw an angel of God, a man clothed in white garments, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. And it talks about this man touching Daniel and saying to him, verse 11, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words I speak to you, and stand upright. For I have now been sent to you. That when he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. And I believe this is undoubtedly the angel Gabriel, sent to speak to Daniel, sent to give him this message. And he said, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before the Lord your God, your words were heard. And I have come because of your words. Daniel was a praying man, because he prayed continually to God and consistently. God heard his words and gave him understanding. And in this case, he sent this angel to speak to Daniel and give him more understanding and revelation. But he said, verse 13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me, or stood against me, 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, one of the archangels, or chief angels, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. So this shows me that God has his angels in the earth, carrying out his will, bringing messages to his servants, and also influencing the destinies of kingdoms and nations, influencing the powers, political powers of the earth. And they are fighting the angels of Satan, the angels of Beelzebub, of the devil. In some cases, they are in opposition, because the devil and his angels are trying to do the devil's will, but God sends his angels to enforce his will. And God's angels have the power to carry out the authority of God over all. So the angel said to Daniel, verse 14, I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, the end of days. For the vision refers to many days or years yet to come. And when he'd spoken this, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. And suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips. And I opened my mouth and spoke to him, saying, My Lord, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have retained no strength. For how can I talk to you? There's no strength that remains in me. And then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not, peace be to you. Be strong, yes, be strong. And when he spoke to me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. And he said, Do you know why I have come to you, and why I must return to fight with the prince of Persia? And when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me against these enemies, these other princes, except Michael, your prince. Now, I've written an article on that showing Michael is another name for Yeshua, Jesus Christ. It means mighty one of God. And you can read that article that Michael is the one who became Christ. And here he shows that there is war going on in the earth, even in the dimensions of the heavens, as it says in Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 10, Paul says to us, Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles, the schemings of the devil. See, we're at war. There's a spiritual war going on, but it's for the most part invisible, because it's being waged by spirit beings. But it involves us. We also are at war. God has claimed us as his own children. The devil is trying to bring us back into captivity as his slaves. So he proclaims his way of freedom, which is really slavery to the flesh and the lusts of the flesh and pride in human pleasure. But God's way is true liberty and peace and freedom. And Paul says on the next verse, verse 12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, this age, against spiritual hosts or wicked beings in the heavenly places," against Satan and his demonic crowd of fallen angels. We have to resist them in the power of God and the Spirit of God, and stand up and resist them. In verse 13, Paul says, "Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that God gives us to fight, that you may be able to stand up, to stand strong in the evil day, and having done everything else, to stand fast and steadfast and confident." The evil day is rapidly approaching. We're living in the last days, and the evil day is rapidly approaching. And I've got to say, brethren, it's approaching faster and faster now that the election is over. And Mitt Romney, who I looked upon as a possible hope for the future to delay the onset of evil, but he perished in the fight, so to speak. He lost the election. It was not to be. So God is allowing things to progress rapidly toward their conclusion. And the lesson for us, I think, is that we must be awake and aware and get ready and be prepared. And don't sit back on our laurels or think this is a time to rest and repair. This is a time to get busy serving God, because there's not much time left. The evil day is approaching. There is not going to be an interregnum, an interval of peace. The trend is set. The die is cast, as it says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The Apostle Paul says, beginning in verse 3, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, the day of Christ's return, will not come until the falling away comes first, the great apostasy, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, the man of lawlessness," my margin says. And we have the most lawless president in office today that America has ever had. The world has the most lawless leader who scoffs at law, who changes law. He thinks to change times and laws like none before him. And the Bible calls such a man the man of sin and the son of destruction. Perdition means destruction, ruin. And what his policies are going to lead to destruction and ruin. But the world is besought and enamored and beglamored of this man's charisma and his smile and his personality, his magnetism. And so they are swayed beyond belief, beyond their senses. So rather than choose a dull, plain man who has a record of accomplishment in building businesses and creating jobs to save the nation, a man of patriotism, they've chosen a man of glamour and grandeur and well, man of great wickedness and deceit to be their ruler. Because, well, let me read it to you. The answer is given right here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Paul goes on to say that this man is going to oppose and exalt himself above all that's called God and that is worshipped, so that he will eventually sit as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now, I believe that scripture is to be taken literally. That there's going to be a temple rebuilt in Jerusalem in the next few years. Then this man is going to go over there and invade the temple and sit himself in the seat in the Holy of Holies, claiming to be the God of mankind, the Messiah, a divine one. There's other scriptures that also say the same thing. But Paul says, do you not remember when I was still with you, I told you all these things? And now you know what is holding him back, that he may be revealed in his own time. There has been forces holding him back. I think one of those forces was the presidency of Ronald Reagan, because the country was going to hell in a handcart under Jimmy Carter, and it seemed like Carter was doing his best to undo the political power and military power of America. And the Russians invaded Afghanistan during his rule, and he gave up Iran to the Ayatollahs, and helped to depose the Shah of Iran, our strongest ally in the region. And then he gave up the Panama Canal. And today the Panama Canal is being run by the Red Chinese. China controls the Panama Canal, and Iran is our greatest enemy in the Middle East, threatening to begin producing nuclear weapons, threatening America and Israel. Well, God then raised up Ronald Reagan, who replaced Jimmy Carter and brought back a new morning in America. And in Carter's days, we had gas lines going around blocks at service stations. But when Reagan came in, the gas lines disappeared, and the Berlin Wall fell, and Reagan defeated the evil Soviet Empire and gave us 8 more years of relative prosperity in America. Well, I won't go into what happened after that, but Paul says in verse 7 of chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians, for the mystery, the hidden truth of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains holds back the appearance of the Antichrist, the lawless one, the son of perdition. He who now restrains him will do so until he is taken out of the way, or until that one is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. He will be revealed. That means in all of his power, in all of his human glory. He will rise to the top. He will continue his ascendancy until he is at the top of the heap, the one ruling the new world order, the end time Babylon the Great. In order to reach that position, he has to be acceptable to the nations of the world. He has to be friends with the Russians, the Russian government. He has to be friendly toward the Chinese, opening our markets for China, cooperating with China's plans for its own destiny in Asia. He has to befriend the Muslims, the Muslim nations, in order to win their allegiance, their support. There's only one man I know in the earth today that has that ability, that background, that charm, who was actually brought into power in America through his communist, Marxist, socialist mentors in Hawaii and Chicago. A man whose rise to power was supported by the Saudi Arabians and the Muslims who contributed for his educational expenses to go to Harvard, who were strong in his support. His background was strongly influenced by communists and by the Muslims, and his own family was Muslim. His mother was a communist, socialist, and his father was a communist and one who hated colonialism. Now, whether his father was a Kenyan, as he claims, or Malcolm X, or Frank Marshall Davis in Hawaii, is a matter of dispute. And whether his birth certificate really was a Hawaiian birth certificate or one they found in Kenya is another matter of dispute. But there can be no dispute that he came virtually out of nowhere, stormed onto the world stage, became the keynote speaker of the Democratic Convention in 2004, and a brand new senator at that time, with no real background in government. And then he ran for president in 2008 and won, beating Hillary Clinton and the Clinton machine in the process. And now 4 years later, 2012, he's won re-election by demonizing and damning Mitt Romney, a man of quality and character, but by claiming he was one of the richest of the rich and pro-rich, not one of the common people, and that he would kick grandma over the cliff by renouncing Obamacare. And so he demonized Mitt Romney, and with all of his negative campaigning and advertising in Ohio and in Florida and all the hotly contested states during the election, and Romney lost. Romney played the part of the good guy. I guess you might say that in world politics, the good guys never win. The good guys always lose, except when God intervenes. Well, I think God intervened to give us our first president, George Washington, a very strong Christian. God intervened to give us several presidents who helped formulate the founding fathers and the foundational decades of the American experiment, the American nation. God intervened to give us Abraham Lincoln during the time of the Civil War, which was threatening to tear America apart. A man of godly wisdom, and who also became a Christian. God intervened again to give us a man like Teddy Roosevelt, a man of strong Christian belief, a man of strong patriotism, a man who taught the strenuous life, a man who had courage and built the Panama Canal, which President Carter then gave away. God intervened again in our nation's history and destiny, I think, to provide us with Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II, We needed a strong leader then to lead the nation, to unite the nation, to fight the Japanese and the Germans, which we did. And God intervened again to bring us Ronald Reagan in the Reagan years, when the light glowed once again and the city set on a hill, the American experiment. But since then, that light has been tarnished and dimmed and virtually put out. After Reagan, we got Bush, and Bush was not a Reagan. And after Bush, we got Clinton, and Clinton was not even a Bush. He was a womanizer and a socialist and a cagey politician. He was so corrupt that I thought he might become the beast of Revelation. Well, he's still on the scenes today backing Obama, but Clinton was replaced by the junior Bush, George Walker Bush, the son. And he was like a neophyte in politics. He was like a beginner. To my mind, he was a man who was a playboy, like the guy on the cover of Mad Magazine, Alfred B. Newman, with red hair and freckles and big ears. And Alfred E. Newman says, "What, me worry?" That's his famous line. What, me worry? And of course, Mad Magazine was fun to read. It always had this series in it on I Spy, You Spy. And one spy was a white spy and the other spy was a black spy. I mean, they were just a figure outlined. One was white, the other one was black, and they were always conspiring against each other and fighting each other, like Russia and the United States. It was being a symbolism. Well, Bush Jr. got us into the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and depleted the treasury to the tune of about $4 trillion. And then Wall Street collapsed at the end of his second term, and Barack Obama strides on the scene, promising change. Change you can believe in. Well, the Bible says that the little horn in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel 7, verse 8, Daniel says, I was considering the horns of the beast that rose up, and these beasts are all end-time powers. The first beast, let's go back to the beginning of the chapter. He saw 4 great beasts come up from the sea, each different from the other, verse 3. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I watched until the wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. In my article on the beasts of Daniel 7, this beast refers to the United States of America and Great Britain. We are compared in the Bible to a lion. We often hear about the British lion. And of course, Ezekiel speaks about the mother lion and her cubs. And the greatest cub of England was the United States, the colony of the 13 colonies of which became America. We are the lion. And we have eagle's wings. We developed air power. And America's greatest claim to fame today around the world is our air power. Missiles and aircraft. In Great Britain as well. In World War II, it's the British RAF that fought off the Nazi airplanes and bombers, and even the V-1 missiles by the RAF. which kept Britain alive until America entered the war. We are this first beast, or have been this first beast. And it says, I watched till its wings were plucked off. That's future. That's when we lose the power of the air. And how would we lose this power of the air which we've been blessed with all since beginning with World War II, and down through the Iraq War, where we pummeled the sands of Iraq and Afghanistan, and our Predator missiles, and our drones today, and our aircraft carriers, which threaten Iran today and China. Our eagle's wings are going to be plucked off. There's going to be something occur that's going to beat back America's air power. We're going to be diminished in power. Isaiah chapter 17 speaks of that as well. Eagle's wings. An eagle is the king of the air. As the king of the air, the eagle rules in the air. America has been ruling in the air up until the present time. But Daniel says, I watched until the wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. This means we are going to be humbled. We are going to be humbled and brought down to the earth, no longer flying through the sky, no longer ruling the air. One way to do that would be through economic collapse. One way to do that is to take $1 trillion out of our military budget, which sequestration now promises to do come January the 1st. Unless the government, the Congress, and the President do something to change the orientation of our nation, we're going to have drastic budget cuts, strike the budget in 2013. Plus war in the Middle East with Iran can also lead to the clipping of our eagle's wings. And when we have our economy pulled out from under our feet, like pulling a rug out from under our feet, and our unemployment rate increases another 5-10%, up to maybe 20% unemployment, as in the Great Depression, the people of America, I think, will begin to humble themselves and look at what's been going on and realize, maybe for the first time, hey, we were wrong. We made a mistake. We let our feelings run rampant, and we elected a man who's destroyed our economy and our country and our freedom. And they're going to develop a man's heart. The heart of a man. They're going to be sorry and say, woe unto us! What have we done? Right now, the people are dancing in the streets. They're dancing to the raucous music and the rapster music. And they're praising Obama. And they don't understand that he is the abomination of desolation. And he will bring about the abomination of desolation with his policies. And then Daniel says, I saw another beast rise up, a second like a bear, with 3 ribs in its mouth and between its teeth. The bear is Russia. We all know Russia to be the Soviet bear. Winston Churchill called it the bear. It moves ponderously and slowly But if you put up a fight, it usually will back up and retreat. But if you don't, it just wades and waddles right in and takes over. On the other hand, a grizzly bear can be very intimidating and very aggressive. This bear is going to conquer. It's going to have ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And is told to arise, devour much flesh. The Soviet Union did that after World War II. They devoured Eastern Europe, and they devoured much of Asia. But then they lost the Cold War because of Ronald Reagan's staunch standing up and opposing them, and God's intervention. But now they're coming back under Putin. Now they're building up again because of their oil profits and energy profits. And they're developing their military anew, and new rockets and new missiles and technology. But they're very friendly toward Barack Obama, who's promised to do more things in their interest after the election, as he promised when the microphone was left open during the summer, during a meeting with the Russian president or prime minister. Then the bear, he looks and sees another rise up, a leopard which had 4 wings and 4 heads. I think, brethren, we're in the process of seeing that leopard rise up right now. Now, a leopard is the animal of Africa. When I was in Africa on tour back in 1981, 82, going through Kenya and the game parks, we saw leopards and lions and giraffes and elephants and hippopotamuses, or hippopotami, I guess to be accurate, and gazelles and wildebeests and zebras and all the other animals, but we saw the leopard. And the leopard is an animal of Africa. And this leopard has 4 wings of a bird and 4 heads. And this is talking about the king of the south rising up. The king of the south, which is being put together by the Muslim Brotherhood. And I would say these 4 heads, we can speculate. Number one of them has to be Egypt, the king of the south of Daniel's prophecies in chapter 11. Egypt is now under the control of Morsi, President Morsi, and the Muslim Brotherhood. And they are seeking to create a Muslim empire or caliphate in the Middle East, possibly with Turkey and Libya, definitely Libya, as one of the 4 heads. And Saudi Arabia, perhaps head number 3. And Syria, maybe, is head number 4. Syria is the battle is going on in Syria right now between the Al-Qaeda terrorists and Muslim Brotherhood fighters against the Assad regime, which is Alawite, connected with the Shiite Muslims of Iran. But the others are Sunni Muslims. And they are fighting to overthrow Assad, and Barack Obama is on their side helping them. And America was shipping missiles and weapons and technology to the rebels from Libya, from Benghazi, Libya. And leading and controlling this shipment of arms to the rebels in Syria was Ambassador Stevens of the American consulate in Libya. And we were fomenting revolution in Syria by channeling weapons from Libya, the old weapons of Muammar Gaddafi, which he had stockpiled in the desert. So you may wonder, well, why then did they attack our embassy in Benghazi? Well, the story, according to what I have, is that an agreement was reached between President Barack Obama and President Morsi of Egypt to support the Muslim Brotherhood in their fight against the Alawite regime in Syria. But also, Morsi wants the release from American prison of the blind sheik who was responsible for the 9/11 disaster. He is a leading Muslim holy man, and he wants the U.S. to release him. But the U.S. doesn't want to release him, the people and the military. So how could he convince the U.S. to release the sheik? Well, according to one story which I've heard, is that the U.S. made an agreement with Morsi that he would have his forces, the Libyan terrorists, so-called, attack the American consulate and capture the ambassador and take him captive, and then trade him for the blind sheik with a minimum of bloodshed. This was to be a deal between the powers, a secret arrangement. And that way he could get the blind sheik, and we would get our ambassador back, and everybody would stay happy. But when the attack began, things fell apart. And when the consulate was being attacked, and there's mortar fire and rifles and machine gun fire, then the American base, only a mile or so from the consulate, where the CIA had some operatives, heard what was going on, and the Navy SEALs there, against orders, they were told to stand down, but they violated the orders and went into the consulate to try to save the people that were being attacked. They didn't know that it was really a ruse, just to fake an attack, capture the ambassador, and then exchange him as a prisoner for the blind sheik. They went in to do good, to save the people there, and brought some of them out of 30 people they rescued. But by that time, Ambassador Stevens was locked away in his safe house, but the smoke had gotten to him and he was wounded, and the terrorists got in the rest of the building and found him, and they saw he was alive, and they cried out, "Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, praise God, praise God." And they rushed him to the hospital, but he died anyway. So the plot didn't succeed, and they never could finish the plot. But in the meantime, many calls had gone out to the U.S. military from Ambassador Stevens and others that they were under attack. They were being surveilled by the enemy, and to send reinforcements, send help. But nobody was sent. For 7 to 8, 9 hours, they were on their own. Well, you read the rest of the story in the news. All of this was kept quiet and was quietly hidden under the rug, and nobody was told the truth until the election was over. And the election was over while that was being covered up, and Mitt Romney didn't want to discuss that, and he did not want to attack Obama. He wanted to do it his way, like a gentleman. I tell you, when you're fighting for your life or fighting in a boxing ring, and if one boxer is boxing according to the rules of the Queen of Marksbury, and the other boxer has a no-holds-barred approach, no fouls, everything goes, then which boxer is going to win? the election was really not really a free election, in my opinion. It was contrived and staged for Obama to win. Now, I thought for a while that maybe Romney might pull it out. Maybe God would give us a couple more years. And there is a Jewish man that surveyed the Bible codes last spring and summer, and he said the Bible codes indicated Romney would win. Well, I haven't seen his reports after the election, but even the Bible Code Digest said when they printed his research and conclusions, they said they did not print it because they agreed with it, but because they respected his opinion. And he was a noted Bible code researcher. So they published it for everybody to read and decide for themselves. And I read what he said, and I thought it was interesting, so I mentioned it to people and put it in an article before the elections that there was the possibility that Romney might win, and if so, they would indicate God was giving us a little more time to get the work done, to get our acts together, to give the nation time to repent, to forsake its sins. But, you know, the election's come. The election's gone. And Obama is standing tall. He won, and Romney lost, and he's going to disappear, basically, from the political scene. That means to me, brethren, that time is not being wasted. God is not amused, and God is not giving us more time. The time is here, and the time is now. There'll be no more time. The beast is rising up. The restraints have been pulled back. He that restrains is no longer restraining. And now the beast has full opportunity and will continue to rise until he reaches his apogee, the height of his power. So this third beast here, it says in Daniel 7, is like a leopard, Africa, 4 wings, probably Libya, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. And they will be the new Muslim caliphate, the king of the south, the Bible prophecy. And then he says, after this I saw in the night visions a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong with huge iron teeth, different from all the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. If you compile these beasts together and the 10 horns and go over to Revelation chapter 13, you'll find this beast is the new world order, the end time Babylon the Great, which will rule the world. It will include Europe, America, Russia, China, and the Muslim states. They will all be together in this new world order. In order for them to have a ruler and a king over them, it has to be a man they will all endorse. For the Muslims to endorse him, he must be Muslim in background and character. What was it Obama said as he spoke in Cairo, Egypt? Told the Muslim prime minister that or defense minister, that he was a Muslim. And after he became president, he would show them what he could do. Well, since then, he's achieved the Muslim Brotherhood's victory in Libya and the Muslim Brotherhood's victory in Egypt. And he's aiding their fight in Syria. And they're going to dominate Saudi Arabia, who was behind them in Syria. So the third beast is coming together. The fourth beast will be a composite of all the others together in a worldwide kingdom. The end time Babylon the Great. And then he said, I was considering the 10 horns of this final beast, the 10 military nations that dominated. And there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. I think those first 3 horns refers to Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, Mubarak of Egypt, and Assad in Syria, who is now on his last legs. When they're gone, the 3 of the first horns will be plucked up. And then in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man. This little horn has eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Literally, that says here in the margin, great things. He'll be speaking great things. Have you ever heard a greater orator and speaker and spokesman than our esteemed and highly worshipped and revered President Obama? Talk about pompous words. And then Daniel talks about verse 11, I watched them because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. And he watched until the beast was slain and the body destroyed and given to the burning flames. Then Daniel says he was grieved in his spirit, verse 15, and the vision of his head troubled him. And he came near to those who stood by, the angels, and asked him the truth of all this. And so he told me and made me know the interpretation of these things. And he said, the great beasts are 4 great kings, or kingdoms, which arise out of the earth in the end time. It was America and Russia and the Muslim kingdom, and then the 4th kingdom. But the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom, verse 18, and possess it forever and ever. Then I wish to know the truth about the 4th beast, the Babylon the Great, the final beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with teeth of iron and nails of bronze, which devoured and broke in pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. And the 10 horns on his head. I was watching, verse 21, he said, and the same horn was making war against the saints, the people of God, the church, and the Jews, prevailing against them. This is a time of great tribulation, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. And he said, the 4th beast shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms. It's going to be a composite kingdom, comprising the previous 3 and other nations in the earth. So it's going to be different. It might well be a new vision and transmogrification of the United Nations. The United Nations, and the 10 horns could be the 10 permanent members of the Security Council. There's only 5 today, but with the addition of Japan and Germany and maybe Brazil and India and Egypt, that would make 10. the fourth beast shall devour the whole earth, and trample it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns of 10 kingdoms, the kings who shall arise from this kingdom. And another shall arise after them, but be different from the first ones. And he shall subdue the 3 kings. This is the little horn that subdues the 3 kings that are in the way, so that this beast can rule the earth. You had to get rid of those standing in the way. Gaddafi was in the way. Mubarak was in the way. Assad was standing in the way. They've been disposed of, or in the case of Assad, being disposed of. When they are gone, then the formulation will be completed. And this horn shall rise up and subdue the 3 kings, and he shall speak pompous words. Now, who is behind the subduction of Gaddafi? Obama. Who is behind the overthrow of Mubarak? Obama. America and Europe, led by Obama, as he says, leading from behind. Leading from behind. Next will be Assad. And he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, against God himself. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High. He's anti-Christian. His is the most anti-Christian administration in American history. Look at the facts. He's forcing the churches to support abortion and birth control, even if they don't believe in it, like the Catholic Church and all the Protestant churches. Abortion is an abomination in the sight of God. I would say that, except maybe in the case of rape or incest or something of that nature. But abortion, the way it's practiced in America and the world today, is an abomination in the sight of God. And this man is going to persecute the saints and intends to change times and law. That means he is a changer. He promises change. And he's still promising change. He's saying, now give him more time. And American people have given him more time. They've re-elected him to 4 more years in office. Time to change time and law. Times and law. In other words, he's going to change the laws or do away with them. He's a man of lawlessness. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. That's 3.5 years. 3.5 years he's going to rule the world at the head of the end-time Babylon the Great. In Daniel chapter 8, he's mentioned again in verse 23. It says, in the latter time of their kingdom, the previous kingdoms, when the transgressors have come to their fullness, that is, the world is full of iniquity and transgression of God's law. This could be translated, when the lawbreakers have reached their epitome of lawbreaking, a king shall arise, having fierce features, or a fierce countenance, who understands sinister schemes. He is a master at plotting and conniving and cunning intrigue. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully. He's a great destroyer. Abaddon, destruction. And he shall prosper and thrive. He's going to bring temporary prosperity. He shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. He's going to attack Israel. He's in the process of destroying America and our sovereignty, so we will become a part of this beast in time power, merged with the rest of the aspects of the fourth beast of Daniel 7, the beast of Revelation. We will be destroyed as an independent nation with its own military. We will be subsumed into the United Nations New World Order Babylon the Great entity. Verse 25, through his cunning he will cause deceit, deception, to prosper under his rule. Deceit, deception. Like the campaign that was just run by the Democrats to re-elect him to office. Demonize the opposition. Destroy the opposition. The Democrats were boasting they would destroy Romney. They would kill Romney. And that's what they did, metaphorically speaking. They massacred him with their attack ads. And the verse goes on, he will exalt himself in his heart and destroy many in their prosperity. They think they're rich, they're going to be destroyed. He'll take from the rich and give to everybody else that serves him. He will even rise up against the Prince of Princes and fight Christ when he comes. But he shall be broken without human means. He will come to his end by the power of Christ and the holy angels when Christ returns from heaven to inaugurate the kingdom of God on the earth. And the angel told Daniel, and the vision of the evenings and mornings which was told to you is true. Therefore seal up the vision. Put a seal on it, for it refers to many days in the future. It refers, brethren, to our day. It refers to this time. The time is here. The time has come. There will be no further delay. In Daniel chapter 11, the duality of prophecy tells us that this one, who's also mentioned again, verse 21, then in his place shall rise up a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. And with the force of a flood shall they be swept away from before him and be broken. And also the Prince of the Covenant. He's going to rise up against the leaders of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu. And after the league, the treaty is made with him, there's going to be a treaty made, he will act deceitfully. For he shall come up and become strong with a small number of people, and enter peaceably upon the richest places of the province, the Middle East, and do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. For he shall disperse among his followers, his allies, his compatriots, the plunder, the spoil, and riches, even the trillions they've borrowed from future generations or caused the Federal Reserve to print up, he gives to his cronies and cohorts and those who are his allies. And he shall devise his plans against the strongholds of the earth, but only for a time. That's a type, just a type of what we're seeing. And then in verse 31, the forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. That's the temple of God in Jerusalem. And they will take away the daily sacrifices, the daily offering. The Temple Mount is going to be divided between the Jews and the Muslims. And on the Temple Mount that the Jews control, the temple will be rebuilt, and there will be daily sacrifices installed. And he will invade and take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. Those who do wickedly against the covenant of God, he will corrupt with flattery. Those who become traitors. But the people who know their God, who really know God, who are really converted and dedicated to God, they're going to be strong and carry out a strong witness in these last days and carry out great exploits of witnessing, preaching and teaching and reaching people with God's truth, the message of salvation. And those are the people who understand and instruct many shall understand. Those people who do understand shall instruct many. Teach many of the people the basic doctrines of God. Yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and plundering. The great tribulation is going to cause many to go into captivity and prison and be put to death in martyrdom. Now when they fall, they shall be aided by a little help, but many will join them in flattery or intrigue. And some of those who have understanding will fall, to refine their character, to purify their character, and make them white with righteousness until the time of the end. So this is talking about the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. It's coming. It's coming steadfastly, and I think there will be no more restraints or intermissions. The election is over. The die is cast. Obama won. He'll have his way with the Senate and the Congress and the American people and the military. Verse 36, and the king will do according to his own will. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and speak blasphemies against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the wrath has been accomplished. He is really going to be serving God. Do you understand that? This man is, without knowing it, he's going to be doing God's will, serving God's purpose, by testing and trying the saints and bringing the world into oblivion and corruption and destruction because of sin. God is going to punish this world because of its massive lawlessness and its apostasy, turning away from the truth and turning to the way of lawlessness. So he will prosper until their wrath is accomplished, God's wrath. For what has been determined shall be done. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But he will honor a God of fortresses, munitions, and the God whom his fathers did not know. He shall bestow with gold and precious stones and pleasant things. And at the very time of the end, the kings of the south will revolt and rebel and turn against him. Verse 40. And he will go back against the king of the south like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen and many ships, and pass through. The king of the south is going to find out he's not really a Muslim after all. And so they're going to rise up in rebellion. And he's going to strike against them and enter into the glorious land and the land of Libya and the land of Egypt, the architects of this rebellion. And many countries will be overthrown, but Edom and Moab will escape. And then he'll hear news from the east and the north, from Russia and China. And he will go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many, and plant the tents of his palace between the seas in the Holy Land. But he will come to his end, and no one will help him. So in Thessalonians again, God tells us the way to escape and to be saved from this end-time deception, this end-time deceiver. The breath of this lawless one, he says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9, his coming is according to the working of Satan, who raises him up with all power, signs, and lying wonders, with all unrighteousness and unrighteous deception and delusion among those who are perishing, because the world does not receive or accept the truth of God, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this reason God gave them over to strong delusion and deception, that they should believe all these lies, even the great lie that he is the Messiah, the great lies propagated by the Obama hierarchy. People just believe it. Like Hitler said, tell a lie big enough and often enough and everybody will believe it. Just keep insisting it's true. And people don't have the intestinal fortitude and courage to investigate for themselves, to prove all things, like the Apostle Paul said, to test everything and prove the truth. Only those who love the truth and will sacrifice for the truth and study and probe and examine and investigate to find the truth will be saved. The rest will be deceived by strong delusion, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in their unrighteousness. So, brethren, we have a chance now to search, examine, persevere, study, and love the truth. Let's put the truth of God first in our lives. If we put God's truth first, He'll put us first. And He'll deliver us and save us through the times to come. Praise God for His love and His truth.